Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, the Little Dragon Reader. I have a wonderful story for you all. It's the Bee Master. Joining us today is a very special guest, Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh loves his dearest friends, the bees, who provide his favorite food, honey. After all, he is a honey bear. Gowri was impatient. There was no sign of the Bee Master. Where could he be? She stood at the window and stared, as though she could make him show up if she tried hard enough. Meanwhile, the balcony was buzzing with activity. Gowri was sure the bee colony was getting bigger, but her mother kept saying it was not. The little girl could not wait for the bees to be removed so she could play in the balcony again. Gowri had not been home when the bees had arrived. Her mother said a big black cloud of rock bees, thousands of them, had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She rushed to close the balcony doors. Within minutes, each rock bee was hanging onto the body of another bee to form what is called a bee colony or nest. By the time Gowri returned from school, there was a large half-moon-shaped bee colony hanging from the edge of the ceiling. "Can you see?" her mother asked, pointing to it. "How wild birds use twigs, leaves, and grass to build a place to lay their eggs, rock bees use their bodies to help the queen bee to do the same." At first, Gowri was scared of the bees. She would look at them and then look away. A few seconds later, she would sneak another peep. Gradually, she got used to them. "Are they busy making honey?" she asked her mother. "Not yet. First, the bees need to make the honeycomb. The bee master told me the honeycomb will begin to take shape in 15 days, and given the size of this bee nest, it will be 3 months before we get honey." The doorbell rang, and Gowri ran to see who it was. A man with a mustache was handing her mother a card. "Do come in, Mr. Ramaya. We have been waiting for you," her mother said. "My little Gowri has been looking forward to meeting a bee expert." "Can you tell me," Gowri blurted out, "why the bees came here?" "Of course," said Mr. Ramaya. "As Bengaluru has grown, more and more large trees have been cut down to make room for roads, shops, houses. Many of the places in which rock bees used to build their colonies have been destroyed, so they have begun looking for new places. They like buildings with trees around them and a pond or lake nearby. We have coconut trees outside, and there is a lake nearby," said Gowri excitedly. "Aha," said Mr. Ramaya, smiling. Then he strode towards the balcony. Gowri followed him, ignoring her mother, who was asking her to stay back. "You can watch me, but you must do as I say," said the bee master, stopping to look at her. Gowri nodded. "First, let me tell you what I will not do. I will not shoo away the bees. That would be dangerous. I will not spray them with insecticide. That would kill them. And I will not burn the nest. That would be terrible, though many people do it. He paused and then said softly, "I will talk to the bees. I know their language, you see." Gowri looked up at him in amazement, but he was already lost in his work. He had begun to chant a mantra. Gowri did not know what was going to happen next. She felt nervous and was glad when her mother came and stood by her. Requesting Gowri and her mother to stay quiet, Mr. Ramaya opened the balcony door and took a small step toward the nest. A few bees approached him. "They have come to check if I am a friend or someone from whom they need to protect themselves," he said over his shoulder. "This bee here is a drone. This one is a worker bee, and this..." His voice trailed off. He closed his eyes and placed his hands on the bees. The bees had accepted Mr. Ramaya, and he and they seemed to be communicating silently. Gowri watched in awe. She was so glad her mother had read about the bee master in the newspaper. It seemed cruel and foolish to burn the bees or kill them with insecticide when they could be treated so gently. A few minutes later, Mr. Ramaya came back inside. He tied some leaves together with a string and placed a small white pellet in them. "What's that?" Gowri asked. "It's a herbal medicine. It makes the bees drowsy so I can take them away safely." Gowri watched closely. Mr. Ramaya went into the balcony and set fire to the bundle. He held the smoking leaves about 6 to 10 inches away from the bee nest. Just as he had said, the smoke from the leaves and the medicine made the bees drowsy. With his hands, Mr. Ramaya carefully pushed the bees into a sack. Gowri saw that one side of it was made of mesh. "This must be so they can breathe," she thought. Most bees seemed happy to be placed in the sack, but a few continued to fly around the balcony. Mr. Ramaya closed the sack, hung it over the wall, and came inside. "Pooty," he said to Gowri, who was trying to take a closer peek at the bees that were still flying about. "Don't you try to do what I did. You need to be trained to work with bees. You could get very badly hurt if you do something to upset them." Gowri heard his words, but she was only half listening. Her eyes were fixed on the balcony, where one by one the remaining bees were settling on the outside of the mesh. Mr. Ramaya went out to collect the sack. "Where will you take them?" asked Gowri anxiously. "Oh, a little out of the city," said the bee master. "I will find a place where they can safely build their colony, where they will not disturb others or be disturbed by them." Turning to Gowri's mother, he said, "I must go. The medicine keeps the bees drowsy for 45 minutes. I need to find a good spot for them quickly. Please tell the others about our work at the Government Bee Training Center," said Mr. Ramaya to Gowri's mother as he left. "Bees need not be killed." Gowri ran into the balcony and watched as the bee master walked to the main road with his sack of bees. She was amazed at what had just happened. If someone had told her that you could talk to bees and take them away safely, she would not have believed it. but she had seen it with her own eyes. All day she kept looking up at the place where the bee colony had been, and as she played in the balcony, she kept wondering how the rock bees were doing in their new home. Did you enjoy that story, Winnie? This story was so good in teaching us the importance of helping and saving nature. Bees are very essential. Did you know that without any bees and their pollination, there would be no more food for us? You're extremely lucky to have such important friends, Winnie. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe so that you can stay tuned to see more stories from me, Little Dragon Reader. Goodbye.